This is the second video in what will hopefully be a very short series on the proposed Eric Street bike path that will link Cottesloe Beach with the principal shared path that runs between Perth and Fremantle. Here's the concept design that's been published by Cottesloe Council. And here's some of the stories that have been appearing in the Subiaco post over the last month. There might have been more published before these, but the post doesn't seem to keep their old issues online, and I only have access to some recent copies that I salvaged from the recycling bin. I read the relevant articles and letters, and then I jumped on my bike, rode to Cottesloe, and cycled up and down Eric Street a couple of times over a few days to see if the residents' complaints were valid or not. We'll get to the video of those rides in a minute. The residents' complaints boil down to the following. The path will be ugly. It will mess up our beautifully kept verges. It's unsafe, and we weren't told about it. I'm not going to read aloud all the articles because that will take forever. However, I will read you this one bit. Retired bicycle planning consultant and road safety auditor Richard Stallard has roundly criticised the proposed shared path in Eric Street at its 85% design stage. His informal audit lists a litany of problems for cyclists, starting with the wrong type of curb ramp. The gradients in places far exceed the limits for recreational bikes and especially wheelchairs, he says. I managed to find the drawings for the 85% design stage, and I'll include a link to them so you can see if you can find any of those issues. I also found the council's long-term bike plan. Now this map might be a bit hard to see, but what they're proposing is a grid of bike paths so that essentially every resident and business will only be a block or two away from a safe, separated bike path. If you ask me, the simplicity of this plan is quite beautiful. I think the biggest misconception that non-cyclists have about these shared paths is that they are for mammals or maffles, adults who are strong, fit and comfortable with riding in traffic. Now, that's just plain wrong. The target market of these shared paths should be casual cyclists, families, little kids, the elderly, and new cyclists who aren't confident about riding in traffic. Now let's keep that in mind when reviewing the design. Now from here on in, I'm just going to talk through riding up the existing bike lane as it stands today, and then I'll come back and I'll ride the path on the verge. So here we are in a painted bike lane. What's wrong with a painted bike lane? Well, it's great, except it's not made out of magic paint, which will deflect vehicles which swerve into the bike lane. And I've certainly had this happen plenty of times where you've got drivers that aren't paying attention, they're on their phone, they're drinking a coffee, they're lighting a cigarette, whatever the hell they're doing, and they just drift out of their lane across the paint and just about wipe you out. The beauty of a new bike path over on the verge is it provides complete separation between you and cars. The only way a driver is going to hit you is if they mount the curb, go across the verge, and maybe that would happen in a medical episode, I don't know, but the risk of that happening is infinitesimally lower than riding out here on the road. Now, notice I've just gone through a roundabout there going uphill, and that's a reasonable gradient, and I was going up at, I guess, a reasonable clip. But imagine having to go out there and merge in November when there's a million people driving down to the beach looking for a parking spot, and they're all coming up behind you at 50 kilometers an hour, and there's 20 or 30 cars in a row, and you've got to crawl through there. Would you be doing that if you've got kids that are coming up the hill there at walking pace? The answer, I think, is no. That would be just a horrible experience, which is why you don't see families with kids using this kind of lane. It's the mammals that use it, and that's why this thing has to be replaced, because it shouldn't just be an exclusive thing which essentially discriminates against a large percentage of the population and stops them from getting out and being active. Now that roundabout's a lot better because it's at the bottom of a hill. You can just roll down the hill at a good pace, and merging in traffic would be a lot easier. Now we've got a pinch point coming up here at the top of the road, obviously designed to slow down traffic, and what the engineers have done is thoughtfully put in some ramps here and a nice wide concrete path to divert you around the pinch point. So there's no getting squished in together with drivers coming up behind you fast. That would be just flippin' awful. So I'm glad they did that, because imagine having that ute coming up behind you and an impatient driver wanting to get past, and you're hot, you're sweating, you don't have an e-bike, you're at the end of your tether, you just want to get down the hill here and have a coffee and recharge, and it's just not a pleasant experience. And you certainly, like I said, don't want to be doing that if you've got a kid on the back, you've got the extra weight, or you're towing them, all that kind of thing. So anyway, we've made it down to the beach. We'll do a U-turn and go back up the other way, and look, it's very much more of the same. This bike lane, look, it's not too bad. It's a reasonable width. The road is nice and wide, so I can't see how you could possibly get close passes from drivers if they're doing the right thing and going out towards the middle of the road to get around you, like that driver did there. They did exactly the right thing. Plenty of space, even though I'm crawling up this hill because it's a fairly steep hill. There is no contention between me and the traffic. And again, when we finally crawl up to the top of this hill, I've got a nice wide concrete path that I can jump on to bypass this island, this pinch point. Because imagine how frustrated drivers would be if they had to put up with me crawling up that hill and then crawling through that pinch point. That would be an absolute shocker. So the off-road arrangement at the moment that's good, and that's going to be retained. That will be one of the features of the new path. Now notice I got out, took the lane early, zipped through here at, I don't know, 35 kilometers an hour or so. Not a big issue, but imagine again if there's heaps and heaps of cars and it's not like a spring day where there's no one around because it's absolutely freezing. Just out of interest, I did stop into that coffee shop on the left there, and I'll go back because it wasn't too bad. Now again, we've got a reasonable hill here, and anyone that talks about hills, gradients, all that kind of thing, it's bad, I guess they're people that don't realise that you can now buy an e-bike. And so if you're not fit, if you're not strong, if you're not young, you go and get an e-bike, and hills are no longer a problem. You can just zip up them much faster than I can. And I go out riding with a mate who's got an e-mountain bike now, and on hills like that, he just absolutely kills me. He just cracks the throttle, off he goes at 25 kilometers an hour, and leaves me absolutely gasping behind him. So if he can do that, anyone can do that. Any talk of gradients being too steep and all that kind of thing, yeah, that argument would have merit 5 to 10 years ago. No longer has merit today. The e-bike revolution has hit us. I can't remember the exact numbers from the Netherlands, but it's something like 2/3 of bike sales are now e-bikes, which just goes to show that the casual cyclist has moved across to e-bikes. Right, now here's a map showing, or map design, whatever, showing what the new path is going to look like. Let's go ride it. And they're going to cut a path through this little bit of bush here, avoiding the trees. I'm not exactly sure what the exact line is, but it'll be something like this. And look, a lot of people are obviously doing that at the moment because I wouldn't say that was a well-worn path through there, but it was an obvious track to take. Now, obviously this path is going to have to be widened because it's not up to spec. But when people are saying, oh, we're going to destroy the verge by putting a path in, well, for a lot of this route, there's already a path here made out of concrete. It's just not up to the modern standards of width. So yes, you'd pull that up, you'd add, I don't know, another metre or so of width to it, and replace it with a nice red asphalt path, which is standard. It's not like, these verges are massive. You could almost put some additional houses along some of these verges. Taking another metre of space is not the end of the world. Now, the route will then follow this quiet side street where there is no on-street parking allowed anywhere along it, so there's no contention there. They're not building any more lane along here, except where I'm jumping off here. There's going to be a new little path just across this bit of verge to cut you across here. Now, some residents are complaining, oh, my beautiful verge. This verge was a weedscape. It was a weed farm. It was the most unkempt pile of junk I've seen. So, some of the verges are really nice. This one I thought was quite cute because they've obviously planted some native shrubs or something and gotten away from the grass. But the one before it, garbage heap. So just bear that in mind when people say, oh, my beautiful verge. Now, clearly along here, there were some patches of brown where I think people are parking cars. So we'll get back to the car parking in a minute, but I think that's one reason why some residents are objecting, is because they want to continue using the verge for their personal parking of their private vehicles, and not because it's lovely open green space. And frankly, Perth, water shortages, hot climate, do we still need to have all this grass, with having golf course levels of water sprinkled all over it? Apparently someone along here has just put in irrigation. I did have a look for new irrigation as I went. Couldn't find any. Maybe they've just hidden it really well. But look at the width of this grassy expanse here. You could land a light aircraft on that. Again, the path is not going to take up a huge amount of space. And there's already an existing footpath along that section of verges, just a lot further over to the left. Unlike here, where this path kind of follows the road. And again, they're not going to be, I think they're not creating a new path, they're just going to widen this existing path. So again, the objections from residents about this is like, we're taking a grey concrete path and we're turning it into a slightly wider red asphalt path. Is that really the end of the world? Now, the other thing to consider, though, is having just ridden that route, do you think that's going to be safer for kids, for families with kids, for the elderly? And I think the answer is yes. And when I hear talk about a safety audit, I'm going through there thinking, what issues will the safety audit pick up, apart from, I guess, driveway crossings and crossing at the intersection? So yeah, maybe some treatments are going to be required there. But this is not Bridge Road and Glebe. It's certainly not. Now, the parking. As I was riding back home, I saw all these vehicles and stuff parked on the verge, and I thought, well, I'm just going to pop over there and get some footage of this, because as I said earlier, I do wonder whether some of the reason residents are raising issues, where they're talking about it being ugly and destroying the verge, etc., maybe it's actually concerns about parking, and they don't want to say that I'm going to lose my free parking on public land. They're couching it in other terms. Now, obviously, the path is going to be on the other side of the road, so this verge is not going to be affected. And I didn't see any cars parked on the other side of the road on the days that I've ridden this route. And here's another verge that hasn't been mowed in quite some time. But I guess if I went back there on other days, would we see parked cars over on the side of the road where the path is going to run? And would that suggest that that's actually the real motivation behind some of these complaints? It's nothing to do with beauty and all that kind of stuff. It's I don't want to have to clean out my garage so I can put my car in there because it's full of fitness equipment, or it's storage, or we've turned it into a spare room or something like that. And although it was built as a garage for storing cars, we're using it for something else, and so therefore council, you've got to provide us with free parking out the front. And you can see along here some fairly bare patches of lawn, and I think what that tells you is vehicles are parked out here an awful lot, because if a car's parked on grass for any period of time, it tends to kill it or injure it, or it's not healthy. And I mean, just look at the number of cars parked at this place. Just absolutely incredible. Some building works going on here. Okay, fair enough. What are they going to do with their Portaloo? Who knows? But just keep that in mind about why some people might not like this. Anyway, will the new path be safer? Yeah, I think absolutely. Will it be good for casual cyclists and families and all the rest of it? I think absolutely. So, the residents' objections, I really do take them with a very big pinch of salt.